Now, now let me ask you this question, because I I know that we're coming up to the external shock issue. Now, what if we taking this new formula that the positive future equals the positive timeline plus unity consciousness, in other words, a dimensional shift. Could one not also interpret the future as as a dimensional shift? And
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
you know that a dimensional shift happens. It doesn't necessarily have to be a negative shock of the nature of a Nibiru event or the nature of a war, i.e., from the point of view of those who are inside the consciousness of the old timeline, where they're trying to get World War III started, or they're trying to get Nibiru started, or by using HARP, or they're trying to get Ebola started by using Ebola Gate and bioweapons. They could be suffering a shock because their whole world is falling apart because they can't get those things started. So for them, it's like, my God, we use these Tetra lunar eclipses and all of the black magic for 3,000 years, and we always won. But now we can't turn the corner. Can't you really interpret it as being that right now it's these guys getting clobbered by this new by the voice of God, by these new higher frequencies coming in through the interdimensional portal at the core of our universe, at the core of the black hole, of all of the singularities in our universe, the core of our universe, the core at our galaxy, the core at our solar system, which is the sun. And it's just blasting with unity consciousness, so that all these people that have been relying, on this past timeline and dimension, which is no more, on their formula of using the power of the mind control in the sun with all their formulas, and the Moloch worship and the Star of Moloch and all that stuff, but it just doesn't work anymore. So for them, it's the end of the world. It's like they're
Well, that
they're they're going through their Armageddon. How
that
how
that's
about
exact
that?
that's exactly what it is, Alfred.
Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lambrant Weber, and this is Exopolitics TV, and we're with our very special guest, hermeneutics expert and author Peter Kling. Welcome, Peter.
Alfred, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you. It's always a pleasure to be within your company. Thank you for having me.
And we were having a pre-show discussion, and I said, look, let's get this all on our program, because our program tonight is really, I would call it uh, prophecy, the Tetra lunar eclipses, and the positive timeline. Is that something more or less what you think we'll be talking about tonight, Peter?
Yeah, we have to look at prophecy in a slightly different context. This isn't God saying, I'm going to do these things. This is reports from essentially, for all intents and purposes, what we would call time travelers who got to see glimpses of the future. And I'll expound on that in a little bit. And so what we are seeing within these prophecies are things that are happening. I'll give you a good example. The Gulf oil disaster, where in Revelation 8:8-9, John says, I saw something like a burning mountain being thrown into the sea. and a third of the sea became as the blood of a dead man, and a third of the souls of the sea died, and a third of the boats were wrecked. Well, when we look at that event, that's exactly what we saw. These oil slicks looked like big, huge blood clots,
Right.
on the surface of the ocean. And we saw all the dead animals, and who knows what's really dead underneath the ocean because
Yeah.
they, with the Corexic that they sprayed all over everything and what settled to the bottom. But we also know that a third of the boats were wrecked. The Louisiana fishing fleet, a third of it went out of business. So
Right.
now this is something that John saw. Now, how would you describe this if you were someone who lived 2,000 years ago? He wouldn't know what an oil derrick was, an
Right.
offshore oil platform, but this thing's as big as a mountain and it's burning.
Right. Right. Now,
So,
yeah. No, no, right. Now let me ask you something. Because just so we get kind of a a a context for this, we are now in a period known as the four Tetra lunar eclipses.
that
That
is correct.
one happened in April, and then there'll be one more in 2014 and two in 2015, and we'll get to those details. But even before we get to that, let me ask you this. Uh, does the Jewish calendar follow a lunar calendar? It,
Yes, it does.
yeah,
It
yeah,
always has, and the reason for that, it's twofold. Uh, when you look at all of the nations that were around the nation of Israel, they were all on solar calendars. And when you read the account in the book of Exodus, here is the God of the multiverse, Yahweh, who's fighting against all of the gods of Egypt, including Ra. And the third plague was a plague against the god Ra. The sun was put out for 3 days. So you have to wonder, okay, what physical events could have happened that would stop the sun's rays from hitting the earth? Now, reading that account, it gets a little deeper, but it's we can bring in an off-planet situation here, because as you start reading this, the Pyramid of Giza, which is where the nation of Israel is living, all of their houses are illuminated during this blackout. So you have to start to look at different connections along the way. But here's the thing: they're all tied back to what would be considered the gods. And when we look at that context of the gods, well, who are they? I kind of like the show Ancient Aliens, but maybe they should change the show to the title Modern Gods and look at it from that context. Who are these extraterrestrials that used to play God? And, I said, okay, in the past week I went back and I looked at the account from the Sumerians, which is where we get religion and government. And when we look at the problems on the planet today, where do they all spring back to? Corruption in government, corruption in religion.
right, right. So basically, the Israel then was a lunar religion as
Yes,
opposed to the solar religions. Is
absolutely.
that would you
Well,
describe? Go ahead.
you can't even say that they were a religion at that point.
Uh-huh.
That they had a god, but
Oh, I see.
they didn't. They were given a set of laws to follow, which is different than worshiping in a religious manner. They actually had laws that they were to follow as a nation. Now, those laws all started in that 40-year period in the Sinai historically, but it was initiated by the first Passover, which was Nisan 14, back about 3,500 years ago.
Oh, okay. Let me just read some facts from the
Sure,
perspective of a war crimes judge, and then we can come back in and look at it from different perspectives. Okay.
absolutely.
This is from a study of the tetra lunar eclipses from previous that occurred before. 1948. Between 1948 and 1950, there were 4 lunar eclipses, Tetras, on feast days when Israel became a nation again. That was the war of 1947-48, in which the Palestinians were displaced from Israel. 1.5 million Palestinians were displaced from Israel, and the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal found that that was genocide on the basis of evidence. That is, that the Israelis came in and committed genocide by displacing an entire people. Before that, it had been 97% Palestinian, going back generations. After that, the core territories were 97% Israeli and 3% Palestinian. And there's lengthy opinions there, including evidence from eminent Israeli historians who agree with that. Then in 1967 and 68, there were 4 lunar eclipses, Tetras, on feast days. 1967 is the war Israeli won, and when Israel regained control of Jerusalem. Again, there, these lunar eclipses that accompany this kind of, genocidal wars of these Khazars from Eastern Europe who take this biblical prophecy and go in and displace a Semitic people that have been there for thousands of years and commit genocide by any objective legal standard. 1973, they were 7 lunar eclipses in 1973, which was the year of the Yom Kippur War victory. And that was the war in which Henry Kissinger that was the war in which depleted uranium weapons were first used. And Henry Kissinger gave secretly, he was part of Nixon's team, depleted uranium weapons to the Israelis to use against the Egyptians. And, so depleted uranium weapons have been found by the Tokyo International Tribunal for War Crimes in Afghanistan to be genocidal and omnicidal and ecocidal weapons. So here we have tetralunar eclipses that historically have led to the establishment of Israel by, genocidal wars. I mean, sure, they're following their lunar eclipses, but they result in genocide. And what has happened in since this first tetralunar eclipse, which occurred on Passover in April 14th, I believe, of 2014, has been the most genocidal onslaught of the Israeli army into Gaza, in which, and I know this because I was called on by international media to report it as a former war crimes judge, in which hospitals were destroyed, in which schools were destroyed, in which civilians were, the Geneva Conventions were wantonly violated. And I objectively reported that. So it seems that it's this pattern for wanton destruction and violation of every norm of international humanitarian law. So what is it with these tetralunar eclipses? It seems like they're recipes for catastrophe. And I have done a program which shows that the moon is, in fact, it's not a celestial body, it's an artificial satellite. And that was put in there in position that it serves as an antenna of an extraterrestrial race that operates out of the rings of Saturn, and that is responsible for broadcasting signals that keep the human race inside of a brainwashing matrix, which you can call the Illuminati, matrix. So it seems like what we're dealing with here is a nation that has used the moon to tune into, as an artificial satellite, to tune into a very negative extraterrestrial race that, in fact, has the human race under severe program, and I'm speaking here as an exopolitical analyst, under severe programming, and is using these Tetra lunar eclipses to engage in genocidal onslaughts of bloodshed, as they did in 1948 and 1950, between 1967 and 1968, and in 1973, and now again in 2014 to 2015 under the current lunar tetralunar eclipses. Okay, over to you.
Wow. Yes. I was going to ask you, what would you call Gaza, what's going on in Gaza today? Genocide. Absolutely. And so now we're looking at these. It's alleged, I haven't done the due diligence, Alfred, but it's alleged that it was a tetrad eclipse period during the time that they killed Jesus.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, that's what I understand. Now, I said I haven't done the due diligence, but in 32 and 33, I guess it was, or 33 and 34 CE, they're at least saying that when you read the account, it doesn't actually say that. It says, it lets you know that there was eclipse because everything turned dark. But
correct.
Somebody's done there was some sort of an eclipse that was going on. There was also an earthquake that happened, and the earthquake was, interestingly enough, during the earthquake, and this was reported to happen at the time of his death, Yeshua, for the more correct Hebrew pronunciation, the curtain between the holy and the most holy in the temple was torn in two. Now, that may not sound like such a great feat, but the curtain was 18 inches thick and made of leather. So it's pliable, movable, and you have to remember the temple wasn't all that old. It was only, what, a couple, from the time that it had been restored. I believe Herod had rebuilt the temple and brought it up to standard. So here's this relatively new curtain that they had installed there, 18 inches thick, made of leather, which is torn in half. Interesting, but the temple is still allowed to stand.
Right.
So that was a marker at that point for the end of the Mosaic Law. So the Mosaic Law ended. Boom. That takes care of that. So you move quickly into where we are today. When you look at the history of what goes on there, there's actually a connection that goes back to Egypt, which brings about the explanation of powers today. And it's connected through Acts, the 7th chapter, the 42nd and 43rd verse, where Stephen, standing before the Jewish high court, basically accuses them of being a bunch of Molech worshippers. He quotes the prophet Joel, and he says, and Joel speaking, Amos, and Amos is speaking for Yahweh, and he says, "Was it to me, O Israel, to whom you worship those 40 years in the wilderness?" So that would put them right out of Egypt. It was to the tent of Molech and to the star of the god Raphan, to whom you made idols and made sacrifices to, and for that I will send you far beyond Babylon. Now, the history from the first century shows that General Titus came in 70 and took took 97,000, somewhere right around there, according to the historian Josephus, back to Rome as slaves. These were the elite, the very same people who Stephen was talking to before they took him outside the city and stoned him to death. So he made the connection to Molech worshippers. When you go to Revelation, the 3rd chapter, the 9th verse, it says, It talks about those who claim to be Jews but are not, but are lying. Those from the synagogue of Satan who claim to be Jews but are not and are lying. Look, I will make them come before you and do obeisance, for they shall know that I have loved you. Why was people say, "Oh, the Bible's been changed." Why didn't they take that verse out? Those who claim to be Jews and who are not, from the synagogue of Satan. Now you got to start looking at this on a interdimensional level, which is really where it starts at, which is where our pre-show starts, and really kind of where the information starts on these tetrad moons. But we have to back up one more year. We have to go back to 2013. And the reason for 2013 is a couple of interesting events happened in 2013. The most significant one is that after over 6,000 years, on 3/13/13, in a day that I said was going to be important but didn't understand why until it happened, we got a new pope. The old pope resigned after 6,000 years, and we got a new pope, this one being a Jesuit pope. What's he do? He puts on a crusade against the banking system and against the debt system, and he starts cleaning house in the Vatican Bank. He says, "Oh, we got to have everybody being the same." That's been his mantra for the past year. Besides now adding to that all religions need to unite to form a one world religion. That just came out a couple of days ago, right, Alfred?
That's right.
So we've got a religious context in here controlling the situation as well. And so now you've got the Vatican looking to control a world situation that is centered in the Middle East, that is, when you do the research and the due diligence on the establishment of Israel in Palestine, it goes back to the Napoleonic Wars with the Rothschilds. Go forward 100. They tried to establish a one world government. At that point, Tsar Alexander said, "You ain't doing it in my lifetime." And Rothschild says, "No, our descendants will wipe your descendants off the face of the earth." And the reason that gave Alexander the immunity, Tsar Alexander the immunity, is that the Rothschilds didn't control his bank, but they controlled the Bank of England, the Bank of France, the Bank of Germany. What else do you need to control when it comes to the European banking system? And they scoffed at the fact that they had control of those banking systems during the Napoleonic days. They wanted to establish a one world government that would be run out of Switzerland. And they tried to do that through the first was the first Geneva Congress, I believe it was, which actually started before the Napoleonic Wars were even over, but lasted beyond the Napoleonic Wars, where they wound up redrawing the map of Europe. If you look at 1914, almost all of Africa was colonized by European countries. 1914 was like the height of colonization within Africa. This is important. We'll come back to it. So the plans for a one world government ended with the Tsar pulling out. Go fast forward 100 years. What happens? 1914, we have a world war. Out of the World War, we have the end of the Tsar's family, just as predicted by the Rothschilds. We have the Balfour Agreement, which comes out, which now that, if you look historically, now that England was controlling that section of the Middle East, they had beaten back the Ottoman Empire, but it wasn't quite there yet. They had to come back during the Second World War to finish the job.
Okay, now let me jump in here.
Sure.
Let me intervene. Okay, 1917. There were 7 eclipses in 1917 when World War I ended, and the Balfour Declaration was signed, allowing Jews to return to Palestine. 7 lunar eclipses. Again, the lunar eclipse, the lunar calendar, the lunar religion, the moon, the artificial satellite that is ruled by ETs that are based in the Saturn rings, that use the moon as an antenna to hold humanity in as a programming mind control device to keep us inside a mind control matrix. In other words, it seems to me that the book of Revelation, when they said the synagogue of Satan, you can translate that as negative ETs or as connected to the moon matrix, the moon Saturn matrix. And that what the leaders of this tribe that had somehow they had gotten into the secret of the moon, and they had tied it into this myth around Palestine. So when they had 7 eclipses, they did all, they brought the bribery with Balfour and with the British Prime Minister and with the Rothschilds, got the Balfour Declaration, which the Rothschilds paid for, allowing Jews to return to Palestine. And that was all because of the 7 eclipses of 1917. Then they timed the invasion and genocide of 1948 to 50 around the 4 Tetra eclipses of 48 and 50, when they came in, displaced 1.5 million Palestinians who were the natives of that area, genocided them out, brought in a bunch of Khazars and said, these are the true Palestinians. These are the real Israelites. They were from Eastern Europe. Then, in 1967-68, when there were 4 more tetralunar eclipses, they won the war for the control of Jerusalem. Why? Because they were plugged into the moon again, and their negative ETs in the moon and the Saturn-Moon control matrix. Then there were 7 lunar eclipses in 1973, which was the year of the Yom Kippur War victory, when they had their buddy in the Nixon cabinet, Henry Kissinger, who was like Mr. World Zionist maven, give them DU weapons for the first time. And DU weapons are like the worst sort of genocidal weapon to use against the poor Egyptians. And then there were 2 lunar eclipses, both on feast days in 1996. And what was that? That was the 3,000th year anniversary when David entered Jerusalem. So even when David entered Jerusalem 3,000 years prior to 1996, what did he use? Secret communications with the moon. QED, I think we've unmasked and we've outed from an exopolitical point of view what the secret of this tribe that has a, quote, lunar religion is, and that is secret communications with the negative ETs that are based in the moon and part of the lunar Saturn-Moon matrix. Now, you know, people say, they say, that's David Icke's theory. Well, what if the data shows it? What happens when data shows something? What happens when data shows something?
Axum's razor. You know, when you look at what is the most logical explanation, you have to say, maybe that's the truth. Now, you know, here I came from a totally different. I learned the interdimensional hierarchy back by the time I was 7 years old. I had a fairly decent understanding of it, and I was a 7-year-old kid meditating about how this all plays out long before we had the good graces of inventing string theory and understanding that, okay, well, those explain the other 7 dimensions beyond our 3-dimensional world, but in fact, there may be many other timelines out there, many other dimensions, or many other things take place. That boggles our minds. Hold on. Let's go back to the most simple thing, because that's where the most logical remains. When you look at life on this planet and how it starts, and when you look at the fossil record and what is both compared, when you compare what's written in the Sumerian text given to us by the Anunnaki and the biblical text given to us by Yahuwah, you find that it is a very similar story, except to one thing. In the Sumerian text, it says that we were made from lower life forms. Okay? I'll go along with that. You've got now Anunnaki means those who come from heaven, or those who came down from heaven. You look at the Bible explanation, it says angels. And they came from heaven. They're actually messengers of God, is the definition of angel. And so here we're dealing with an interdimensional or extraterrestrial, at least at the very least, life form, who has influenced us from the what is called the cradle of civilization. And this takes place, the record that is given to the Sumerians takes place about 1,500 years before the record in the scriptures. But when you read it, it all kind of starts at the same place, just a different view. Now, when we read the account and we look at the Earth geologically, we can say, yep, Big Bang, even from M theory, to two membranes coming together in a transfer of energy. You had energy that started in an event horizon, and you had an event that took time for that event horizon to develop to the point that where we could actually be here. When you go back and look at life on Earth, the Cambrian period, all of a sudden life explodes. There's never been so much life on this planet ever. We've only gone through extinction level events. Scientists can't explain that. If we evolved, where did these guys come from? You want to confuse somebody who believes in evolution? Tell them to explain what pterodactyls evolved from. They're completely unique, completely different. They didn't evolve from anything. They evolved from pterodactyls, the flying creatures of the heavens, the fish in the sea. And so when you look at this, there's some things that they're given orders, and other things that it says God did himself, or Yahuwah did. The soul and conscious energy, the God concentration, what we would call the God particle, but it's a whole dimension of that energy, that gives life to everything that we know is real, or believe is real anyway. When you get to this creation in the scriptures, it says that Adam was created from this energy. Yahuwah put the breath of life into the body. And what separates modern man, or what separated Adam from the Cro-Magnon copy, is a complete DNA. He had the God DNA. It was a perfect copy, given the soul of God. It was a new species connected to the other dimensions. Now, there's one thing. You have to look at what all this time genetic engineering. Who were the genetic engineers? And so when you look back historically, the genetic engineers were more than likely off-planet interdimensionals or extraterrestrials that genetically engineered life on this planet. They came back after a disaster and they re-engineered it and got it going again, then re-engineered it and got it going again. And so we have accounts of Atlantis and Lemuria and Muir, and the accounts of how many times mankind was created by the Mayans. And guess what? Here we are again. So it's a paradox that we're kind of living in, because it's history repeating itself on a cosmic interdimensional level, and this time it involves extraterrestrials or interdimensionals. But now let's take a look at this from the DNA viewpoint, or our creation, or genetic engineering. Who were these genetic engineers? Well, there's an interesting clue. You go back into the book of Ezekiel, and it talks about this great honor that's given, the covering cherub of Eden. The covering cherub of Eden was placed over to watch Eden. Now, it would only make sense that this covering cherub of Eden was significant enough to get this title, to watch the next generation of interdimensional life forms living in the third dimension grow and grow in number on the surface of the ground. And then we get from the book of Enoch that the Watchers came. Well, what was the Watchers' job? To watch and help the humans develop. Now, where did these Watchers and the covering cherub of Eden come from? Could they have been those responsible for genetically engineering life in the third dimension? You can't rule that out. It makes sense. They have a connection. Hey, you guys did such a great job. We're going to now make you the babysitters. Because when you go back to Genesis, the first chapter, in the creation of man, God says to Adam and to the first woman and man, he says, let us create man in our image, the image of something more high, not the image of the monkey, the image of something off planet. And so he created the male and female, and he said to them, be fruitful become many and fill the earth, and have in subjection the fish of the sea, the flying creatures and pterodactyls of the heavens, and the wild beasts of the field. All the genetic engineering that the genetic engineers did for the last 500 million years was just, oh, here you go, it's all yours, kids, have fun. Boy, talk about playing devil's advocate. Wouldn't that make you want to rebel and say, hey, all you guys down there are now going to worship me? I'm the covering cherub of Eden. And the rebellion starts. And so we're separated genetically from our father, and our DNA is destroyed. And now every 100 years they can change history and tell it whatever they want us to. Here's a good case. 100 years ago, in schools, they taught the creation account from where we came from. 100 years ago, very interesting date, 1914. Now in schools, they teach the Anunnaki account. We made you from lower life forms. You evolved. You see, you're subservient, not equal. Now, here's the thing. Adam was a perfect human specimen, perfect DNA. And we know that cloning was, or at least genetic engineering is involved by Genesis, the 2nd chapter. It says, hey, it's not good that the man's alone. Let us make a helper for him. And there's a perfect account of an operation. The sleep falls over the man, the tissue is open, a sample is removed, tissue is closed, sample sent down to genetic engineering. Genetic engineering do their thing. They put it in the zip-zap machine, send it back down to Earth. Here's a woman. Adam knows that she's genetic engineered. He says, you came from me, from my flesh, of my flesh and bone of my bones. You are a woman. So there's this knowledge that they were genetically engineered. And so the story starts. But now, for a lot of the way, the story is very similar, except the Anunnaki give us religion and politics as means to control. And so now we are under Anunnaki rule, regardless of how you cut it. But 2,000 years ago, an event happens, something that all the prophecies of the Hebrew scriptures point to. The Messiah is born, an extraterrestrial with perfect human DNA that was implanted into a Jewish woman or a Hebrew woman. Let's get the terminology correct, a Hebrew woman. And she was told by an extraterrestrial or interdimensional, the one that we know by the name of Gabriel, that, guess what? You're impregnated with the child of God. Sound far-fetched? Aliens come, they abduct you, they impregnate you, they put you back on Earth? No, it doesn't sound far-fetched at all in our time frame. And so here, this man that we know as Jesus dies for our sins. Well, wait a minute. He died to regain what Adam lost. You see, it took a perfect God to replace a perfect God child. And that's what we're supposed to be. That was the bar, so to speak. We are all supposed to be children of the Most High, and we've been kidnapped. So we've been kidnapped by interdimensionals. Now, here we are. Let's look at this. We have to look at this from what we would call an interdimensional or extraterrestrial viewpoint. And before we can get to the blood moons, we got to take one step back, and that's Comet Ison. The comet of a civilization's lifetime event, the most fantastic comet that never happened. We were told about this comet for well over a year. It was supposed to be everything from the mothership to the red dwarf planet coming back to destroy Earth. More than likely, based on the recalculation of the long Mayan Baktun and where Comet Ison was supposed to be, Comet Ison would have represented Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god of Mesoamerica, because on December 16th, it should have been right in our evening sky. If you recall, right at the middle of December, Venus hung right at the evening sky. Just after the sun went down, Venus was there. Ison should have come right up off the top of Venus like a giant exclamation point or a feathered serpent god. But something happened to it. Now, interestingly enough, Comet Ison vanished at the start of Hanukkah. Interesting, the Festival of Lights, the light of a lifetime went out. And at the end of Hanukkah, what did we get? We got the death of a Knight of Malta, Nelson Mandela, the man who died twice. We understood that he died in June 26th, and he got better and went home. But he died officially on the 5th of December. Now, this essentially sets up a whole little interesting ramifications. Hanukkah ends on the 5th, and we go into the 10 days of Mandela. And the most incredible thing in the world is that you've got over 90 world leaders, including the president and dignitaries from around the world, President Obama, who are standing at this podium with a symbol of a phoenix rising with a sunburst behind its head, and it's rising out of a pyramid. And this is all layered on a very symbolic picture of Africa. Black man, ivory, palm trees, very symbolic. So we've got the phoenix rising out of Africa in symbolism placed on the podium where over 90 world dignitaries speak, while a crazy man is standing next to them signing what they are saying in a language no one who understands sign language can interpret. And while he's doing this, he's claiming that he's seeing angels flying in the stadium while all these dignitaries are doing their thing for a dead Knight of Malta, a servant to the Vatican. And so now we have to look at this on an interdimensional level, because what happens after this? Well, the 10 days of Malta end on the 15th. On the 16th is a Voortrekker alignment. The Voortrekkers were a group of people who had settled in South Africa. There's a monument built to them. And on December 16th, there was an alignment there, but it was also the alignment for the Long Bakhtun, where Comet Ison should have been right off of Venus in the night sky. Perfect. But it wasn't. It wasn't there. Now, after this, the situation in Ukraine goes hot. This is very near and dear to my heart, because 10 years ago, I was in Ukraine during the Orange Revolution. It was there I was told, you need to write letters to Earth. And this time, it goes hot. I can't believe my eyes. What they're doing, they're pulling up the cobblestones and throwing them at the authorities. Come on, last time it was 11. And then all of a sudden, people are being shot. And the shooters are tracked back to German mercenaries, German national mercenaries. And, Alfred, I literally would walk out of my apartment in Kiev, and if I was there during the Orange Revolution, during this past revolution, I would have literally walked out into the revolution. It was happening literally 10 steps from my apartment door. So, okay, it's very near and dear. And we saw this. This happens right after the 10 days of Mandela, or right around that same time. What else do we see? The Ebola outbreak. And what do we see as soon as the break of the new year? This radical group, ISIS, named after the goddess Isis. And if you go look at ancient statues of the goddess Isis, and look at the symbol that's on the shield, that makes up the shield that was on the podium, that every dignitary that went to this interdimensional raising of spirits of long ago were standing at. You see in this raising phoenix symbol the goddess Isis. It's a connection directly back to the gods of Egypt.
Okay. Intervention time. You say Ebola and ISIS meme begins. This is right after this first Tetra lunar eclipse.
No, this is right after Comet Ison. We didn't get into the Tetra-lunar eclipses yet.
Okay.
These things all happen immediately in December.
Oh, December.
Yeah.
Okay.
All these things happen in December.
Okay. Now
look at the symbology. The god of the Mayans was knocked out.
Yeah.
And we've got this Knight of Malta, direct connection to the Vatican, who was empowered by 93 dignitaries, I think it actually was, empowered in a 10-day ceremony of doing what? Raising a symbolic phoenix from Egypt on the back of Africa.
Right.
You have to look at the symbol.
No. I understand. Now, the intervention that I want to make, just so that people don't get fully enmeshed with the memes of Ebola and ISIS, is number one, Ebola should be called Ebola Gate, because Ebola, the Ebola outbreak, is in fact the Ebola bioweapons attack. And people can go to our blog, Ebola Gate, and which demonstrates that what has occurred is that organizations which tie back to the CDC, which tie back to the World Health Organization, which deeply tie back to World Rothschild, Rockefeller, uh, Illuminati groups, in fact, are behind an a seeding any a bioweapons outbreak of a bioweapon known as Ebola in these West African countries for purposes of, number one, starting that outbreak there, trying to get a pandemic started in Africa so they can get African oil, so they can depopulate Africa to get African minerals, which is one of the long-term goals there, and so that they can use certain pandemic propagation techniques if they get on a negative timeline. And we've seen the actual, you can go to Ebola Gate, just Google Ebola Gate and you'll go to the blog. We have the actual progression under current infection rates that by June 2016, there'll be 4.5 billion people infected by the Ebola bioweapon and 2.7 billion people dead. And that their measuring point is the Georgia Guidestones, which is only 500 million people survive. Okay, that's the catastrophic timeline that the people who are being handled by the negative extraterrestrials in the moon, these lunar following moon, being handled by the gods in the moon and the gods in the Saturn.
The man in the moon. Remember that mime?
Yeah.
My goodness, think about that. Oh, that's the man in the moon up there,
Yeah. That we know these are the guys who go back to David, who marched into Jerusalem 3,000 years ago under 2 lunar eclipses. These throughout history, the last 3,000 years, they've used lunar eclipses to wreak havoc on humanity, and now this is the current havoc wreaking. This is I am the voice in the in this Greek chorus or in this panel that is coming with that voice. You have a different voice in this Greek panel.
but we both lead to the same place.
I know. But people should understand what the dynamic of this panel is.
Well, absolutely, and that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Is that when you look at it strictly from what's going on, there's no rhyme or reason. When you look at there's outbreak and conflict here, outbreak and conflict there, and Alfred, for years I was like, okay, I understood the whole interdimensional structure, off-planet structure, on how everything was laid out and where we fell into the category. But I couldn't make rhyme or reason of this satanic world and how it operated. It was like going to listen to a concert and, all the band, everybody in the orchestra is tuning up. It's all discord. Everybody's doing their warm-ups and well, the music's about to play. Actually, the music's been playing. And it's playing on a dimension that most people are totally blind of today. And that's part of the problem, is that they are blind to what is going on. You have to get that mental shift in order to, you peel back that onion and sooner or later the truth is going to be exposed, and it comes all down to interdimensional extraterrestrial forces that seems to have enslaved us and not have allowed us to attain that positive timeline, to which they have no relent now but to give up or wipe us out. They've chosen to wipe us out. But knowledge will stop it.
Right,
Knowledge
right.
and uncovering this and coming to aware that's like, I'll give you an excellent personal example. Alfred, a few years back, I was on my way to a party. It was in the wintertime, and to be safe, I wanted to stay on the main roads. But normally I would take this little shortcut that went, back through the woods, and it would save me some time and traffic. And now I was more concerned about the roads being passable than anything else. And just before I got to my little turn off, I got this instant vision just popped into my head where I saw a vehicle lose control on the road, bounce off the guardrail, and hit me head on. Now, I knew exactly in my mind, in this little vision that I saw, where that happened. And it was my intent to be on that road in a couple of minutes. But I still had time to bail out on that little shortcut. So I thought, you know what? If I'm not at that section of road, there's no way that what I foresaw could possibly happen to me. So I took a different timeline. Now, the incredible thing about this is that I went to the party. Got there. The hostess, I'm inside. The hostess is on the phone. She hangs up the phone. She says, "You're not going to believe this. Some people who left here 5 minutes ago just hit black ice out on 01. They bounced off they lost control, bounced off the guardrail, and totaled their car out on the other side of the road." No, I believe that. That's exactly what I saw. Confirmation. I changed my personal timeline where I did not meet what I foresaw. Now, I could have totally ignored that. I said, "Oh, Peter, you're seeing things. It's all in your head. Forget, And then when it happened, I would have been standing there saying, probably it was a head-on, probably being rushed to the hospital saying, "Why didn't I listen to myself? I knew that was going to happen." You say, Alfred?
No, I understand. I understand.
It's that connection. Now, here's the thing. We are told, quite frankly, by the media what to believe. And if you believe that you're going to die of Ebola, chances are you might die of Ebola. But you know what? If you believe that you're going to die, if they're telling you, "Look, this is going to happen," I like going back to the Boston bombing. What Boston bombing? You had everybody go into voluntary lockdown on a drill. They went into voluntary martial law in one of the most major cities in the world based on a drill, and that meme's been carried out. And they're still looking, they're still trying to hunt down the end of this. Now they're connecting the brothers back to the terrorist group ISIS. Isn't that
right. And so just to deal quickly with the other half of the
Well,
Ebola ISIS meme, Ebola is Ebola Gate. It's biowarfare by the same old cast of characters, by the Zionists and by their minions in the CIA, in Rothschild Rockefeller camp, the whole thing. ISIS is the same thing. You trace back, ISIS goes back to Al Qaeda, Al CIA, goes back to U.S. The U.S. founded Al Qaeda, so there you go. So it's a snake eating its tail. It's the U.S. attacking itself like it did on 9/11. That's ISIS. So it's all
it's the same thing over and over again.
It's all false flags. Now, yeah. So I just said my piece. This is the Greek chorus. So back to you.
So now that we uncover the root of the evil, if you want to call it that, we uncover the root cause, that we are dealing with some pretty nasty interdimensionals or extraterrestrials.
And they live in the moon.
They may very well. We've been, the unofficial word is that we've been told to stay off the moon.
Yeah.
And then you have those that'll say, "Oh, well, we never went to the moon to begin with, so wait a minute. There's just too much circumstantial evidence to the moon itself and what's actually going on there."
And guess which tribe for the last 3,000 years has worshipped the moon and has done all of its genocidal dirty work during tetralunar eclipses.
Now, yeah, you see, now here's where the paradigm changed 2,000 years ago, and where the quote Christ consciousness came in. I'm going to say Christ consciousness for lack of a better term. Christ had nothing to do with religion. Jesus was Hebrew. He didn't say anything about starting a new religion. What he told Pilate, who had the right to let him go, was that his kingdom was no part of this world. Off planet again. It says when he left, he was taken up to the sky. He was captured in the clouds. He was raised up and captured in the clouds. He's supposed to come back the same way. Would that be a lenticular cloud? Because when you go back to the account in Exodus of when the Jews, when the nation of Israel leaves Egypt, they are covered by a cloud during the day and a pillar of fire. Would that be a laser beam coming down out of the cloud that also blocked the pursuit of Pharaoh? Again, are we dealing with off-planet interdimensionals?
Right.
You know, you have to calculate this in when you read these accounts. It was a cloud that covered them by day. Okay, well, we've seen some very interesting lenticular clouds, which make some very interesting maneuvers. Enough said on that subject. There's whistleblowers that establish a long connection, which goes all the way back to Hitler and Project Paperclip to bring that technology here. And when we look at who financed Hitler, we can track that directly back to Prescott Bush as being the main culprit involved in, well, he was the fall guy. He was the fall guy. How does the fall guy for the financier of the Third Reich go on to be, he's arrested and has all of his assets seized in 1941 when the United States declares war on Germany after the false flag of Pearl Harbor. And now all of his assets are seized. Well, he's also working for Brown Brothers Harriman, and Prescott Bush's father-in-law is Herbert Walker, who's a very wealthy man behind the scenes and a staunch Nazi supporter. And so somebody needed to take the fall for Brown Brothers Harriman, Prescott Bush. Okay, what was in it for Prescott Bush? Well, after the war, the man who was accused of aiding and abetting the enemy and had all his assets seized went on to become a state senator. He went on to become, his son went on to become, as we know, head of CIA, and then the president, head of CIA, controlling all the intel. His grandson becomes the president as well. Now, 3 generations, all Nazi supporters responsible for bringing Operation Paperclip into the United States after the fall of the Nazis. Who's ruling the United States? Axum's razor replies. So it's the same fundamental idealism that turned around and established the Nazis. Now, who were the Nazis? Well, the Nazis were the National Workers Association. It would be in German. It would be National Arbeit is the German word for work, and so NA and Zionist ZI, and here you have the same control factor that's going on. But we are shown the face of the shop. We're not shown the off planet. That remains a myth. Why do you think they don't want to tell us? Hey, aliens exist. You go back to what it says in Revelation, the 12th chapter. It says a war breaks out in heaven, and Michael and his angels battle the great dragon and its angels. It's not saying anything about demons. It's saying angels in both accounts. And it says that there wasn't any room left for the great dragon, and down to the earth it was hurled. And so, and then there's even a warning. Woe to the earth, because the dragon has been hurled down, knowing he has a short amount of time. When do we see the false flags really spike on this planet? First World War. Every historian worth his salt will tell you we had a diversionary change in the First World War. Interestingly enough, that thing that makes there's one thing that kind of brings this all together, and that is the protocol of the learned elders of Zion. Another state senator, Dr. David Duke, is having it reprinted in illustrated form at $114 a copy, in nice leather-bound volume, and you can see the last 100 years how it applies to what was laid out in the Protocol of the Learned Elders of Zion. Now, when I read that book, I had already known Revelation. I was like, whoa, hand in the glove, fits better than OJ's, smoking gun. What they laid out in the Protocol fits the prophecies of Revelation. So, again, back to the off-planet dimension. When does it all turn to garbage? 1914, the First World War. This is the height of African colonization by the Europeans. Now, interestingly enough, when Ebola is first discovered, you've got the African colonies all in rebellion in Africa. And you have Ebola and AIDS, both tracked back to the African continent. Thank goodness, at least Ebola has primarily stayed on the African continent. AIDS has become a worldwide epidemic. So, but both of them are tracked back to Africa, and they are both genetically engineered viruses.
The origin of the AIDS is Fort Detrick, Maryland.
Interesting. They track back somehow. The official track back for the Spanish influenza goes to an army base in Kentucky, I believe it is.
Yeah.
So, wait, but that was 1920. And that infected all regions of the world. There's some people that believe, some researchers believe that infection could have infected as many as 100,000 people.
Yeah. These are all depopulation that relate to, in essence, they all come down to these negative interdimensional agendas that are furthered by this war crimes racketeering syndicate, of which an integral part are the leaders that have for the last 3,000 years followed these lunar eclipses and followed the negative ETs that operate from the Saturn-Moon matrix.
Where else would they get the information?
Exactly.
And we know that's where they got the information, because when you go back and examine the text, you look at the Mayans and the Sumerians or Babylonians, they were known as the best astronomers on the planet ever.
Right.
And wait a minute, where were their telescopes? Where were their computers? They were given the knowledge of what to look for. You read the accounts, you go back one long Bach tune ago, 5,125 years, you run to the same period as what's recorded in the Book of Enoch, an interdimensional invasion of planet Earth.
Right.
And there you have the creation of an abomination we know as the Nephilim. But being playing the Greek side of this, you'll love the pandemic situation, because Pan, half animal, half human, could have been the product of a bestiality relationship with a goat, and Pan is where we get pandemic from.
Now, let's get back to this Tetra lunar eclipse script, because then we can comment on it from the point of view of the positive timeline. Now, you have said that the Tetra moon blood eclipses started at April 14th, 2014 on Passover. Could you take it from there?
Sure. Yeah. Now there's some interesting things all associated with this. It's not just the blood moons that are occurring. April 14th, this is interesting in itself. In the best that I could find, and I've challenged people to find another occurrence, nobody's come up with it. April 14th, 2014, and Nisan 14 in the Hebrew calendar are the first time that these two dates ever corresponded together in history, since we've had the Gregorian calendar. So that starts the first of the Tetra moons. 15 days later, we have a full solar eclipse, which happens. That solar eclipse happens on April 29th. So we are now due for the next blood moon. Now take a look at everything that's happened from that blood moon. We've had most of it has just started here again recently. We've had the buildup of Ukraine. We've had the buildup of ISIS. We've had the expansion of Ebola. The death toll in Ebola has doubled in the last month, by the way, as of the most recent information that I saw today.
This is, you can go to just Google Ebola Gate, and you'll see, and the infection rate is an exponential curve. And the only way to stop that exponential curve is to expose Ebola Gate as a false flag, as a bioweapons attack.
Absolutely, and I want to go back and people say, well, what do you mean? Uh, let's look at the 2012 Olympics. Long before the Olympic event ever took place, while this was all being put together and the finishing touches were being put on and names were being put on boulevards and people started doing research, especially when it came to the Olympic symbol for that year, which seemed to spell out Zion, and then everything that was related to that. There was chatter across the internet that this is the perfect flag for a false, the perfect storm for a false flag attack, because you're bringing people from all around the world into one central location, into London, the financial center of the earth. And if an atomic bomb goes off there or a dirty bomb goes off there, it'll cause war for sure. We'll have World War III. And there was one other thing. Hey, if everybody's going home and you release a biologic in the subway of, in the underground of England, or at Heathrow, like they didn't do that before, that all goes home to all those countries. Now all those countries are infected. So it's the perfect storm. Now none of that happened. But you know what did happen, Alfred? Over 700,000 seats went unsold to Olympic events. The consciousness was raised by everybody uncovering the meme that this was the perfect storm for a terrorist false flag event.
Right.
And so now a signal was sent to those who could have set something off that, just think of how many people were talking about this before the event. If they would have set it off, how many people would have said, aha, we told you this was going to happen? But they didn't set it off. Now everybody that was crying wolf is standing there like, okay, good, glad it didn't happen. What's the next thing? The next thing is Ebola. Ebola accounts for a plague that could wipe out a third of the population of Earth, according to Scripture, according to prophecy. Now, these are things that have been foreseen.
And according to current infection rates and the mathematical paradigm, according to current, scientifically, according to current infection rates.
Yeah. I don't doubt that. When I saw today's statistic that it was over, that 1,000 more people died in the last month, I was like, wait a minute. How long did it take? It took 6 months, 7 months to get to the death toll of 1,000 people. It only took a month to get to the next 1,000. What does that tell you? To turn around and pull and draw that out in the perfect. Oh shucks, it slips my mind here, that the golden ratio, and we're in deep trouble.
Okay, now at this point we're going to take just 5 minutes to introduce the concept of the positive timeline, which is a parallel dimension or a parallel reality to the catastrophic timeline, which is the timeline in which the infection rate goes exponential, for example. And I just want to direct the viewers to a website which is positivefuture.info and just read very briefly a sentence or two. Okay?
Absolutely. Do you want to do that now?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
No.
absolutely.
This is like I'm just I'm just I'm just the Greek chorus here. Okay, okay,
Hold on here, Alfred. Oops.
okay. Here we go. Time science shows our Earth is on a positive timeline in our time-space hologram. A key discovery is that one, a critical mass of humanity, two, is co-creating a positive future. Through conscious acknowledgement that three, we are synergistically traveling along a positive timeline, four, in unity consciousness. The positive future equation has supplanted and overcome an outdated matrix elite formula that is no longer effective. The outdated formula, matrix elite formula, is problem plus reaction equals solution. Okay, that's their false flags.
Correct.
The positive future equation is positive future equals positive timeline plus unity consciousness. The positive future equation suggests that in the synergy between the positive timeline and unity consciousness, which is we are one, a critical mass of humanity is collectively and individually activated for some or more of the suggestive actions and policies for a positive future, and synchronistically resources and actors are brought together in multidimensional universe processes to manifest a desired result. In other words, the positive timeline happens. And
In reality, the positive timeline has already happened.
happened.
We
And
haven't gotten there yet.
yeah. No, but it is happening. And that's why the 2012 false flag, London false flag, did not happen. And
Uh,
that's why all these things are not happening, i.e., the what happened is that on December 21st, 2012, we entered into a whole new timeline and time dimension. And the interdimensional portal at the core of our universe started permanently generating and broadcasting waves of unity consciousness, which is we are one, instead of duality consciousness, which is I win, you lose. The matrix elite operate under I win, you lose. So this is a new frequency. This is the reality that we're traveling on. So the matrix is trying to implement all of these false flags and plans under an outdated equation, and they just can't make it happen. So I just wanted to put that overlay on why, now that we're in the Tetra lunar eclipse of 2014-15, which they think is going to follow the formula of the Tetra lunar eclipse of 3,000 years ago, of 1917, of 1948 to 50 when Israel was founded, of all of those other Tetra lunar eclipses, for example, of 1967-68, when Israel regained control of Jerusalem, of 1973, when the Yom Kippur War was won, and of 1996 was the 3,000th anniversary of David entering Jerusalem. All that is over. And the Saturn-Moon matrix has been canceled out by the positive timeline. And all the good Jews that aren't members of the synagogue of Satan are happy. And the synagogue of Satan is, as they say, geschmutten.
It still thinks it's alive. Here's an interesting thing,
Yeah,
and I agree. I agree in what you're saying. I'm looking. I look at this more like from a microscope viewpoint. You've got the overall picture, and yeah, that is correct.
yeah,
We are on a positive timeline. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. A lot of people, when they read the scriptures, they come at it from hell and damnation. Well, when you look at the account of the lake that burns with sulfur and fire, it talks about the beast system, the dragon system, and death being thrown into this lake that burns with sulfur and fire. That means boom, it stops. Everlasting cutting off, they end. And they end while they're still alive. So something happens that brings that to an end. Now, there is a vibrational shift which is going on, which more and more people are starting to come to understand, and which we can prove scientifically at the soul level. And so when you look at, you talk to almost anybody that's had a near-death experience, and now everything that everybody has in common, while everyone has a different experience, they all have in common that great white light. And so it's our soul consciousness which brings us all together. You ever get a phone call after, oh, I was just thinking about you. Yeah, why? Because we have that mental connection. How was I able to see an event that was going to happen in my immediate future and be able to avoid it without having the consciousness that can go beyond the dimension of the current timeline which I was living in order to see a future result, in order to avoid that result? It's all tied into something that you brought up as far as, and this is scientifically provable, how the speed at which our brain operates at. It operates in 5 speeds, but pretty much commonly 4 speeds. I say 5. There's a gigahertz now. If you like, you ever involved like in an accident, all of a sudden it seems like time is slowing down. Time doesn't really slow down. Your brain is just processing things so fast. It's off the charts in beta. So they call that response a giga response, I believe now. But essentially our operating speeds are beta, alpha, theta, and delta. And there's a little misnomer, a little misunderstanding about raising your consciousness. It's not so much raising our consciousness as it is slowing down the speed at which our biological computer is running, so we can stop getting the physical 3D input and start getting interdimensional input from the multiverse around us. And it physically works. When we are thinking in beta, which is our daily operating brain speed, this is where fight and flight response lives. This is where if you're driving to work in the morning commute, you better be in beta, and because you may have to react quickly. However, we take it to the next level by using different hand gestures, yelling, screaming, and wishing people unkind endings to their day. That is, where we are, the tension that we've built to each other. Just spend time in a daily commute. The best thing to do is make friends with the people around you. If you're stuck in traffic, what else are you going to do? Start shooting at each other? And that's the whole concept, you see, is to get out of that beta fight or flight response, which is when you look at a situation like that's going on in the Middle East with what's happening in Gaza or happening with ISIS. People are being, and throughout a lot of Africa too at this time, people are being forced to displace from their homelands and being pushed to other parts of the world, not by any doing of their own, but by outside forces. This all needs to change. That has to shift. And it's by being able to move out of that fight and flight syndrome and step it down a notch, go into alpha. When we are in alpha, we are automatically more feeling. The reason is, in alpha, our brains operate at a slower speed. We have time to contemplate life a little bit, If we're going to pray, we start off, we will start praying, and from beta, we'll go into alpha. We have trigger words that we use that make the mind automatically go down. In alpha, we will daydream. When we relax even more and slow our brains down even more, we go into a more dreamlike state that is called theta. Theta is the state where the Far Side Institute does all their remote viewing from. And when you are in theta, time and space as we understand it pretty much stops. When you slow your brain down to the delta level, you are in a coma, or you are in extremely deep consciousness. Your brain is only vibrating between less than 4 cycles per second. Your soul energy is pretty much free to go wherever it wants to go. While in a coma in a hospital in Westchester County, New York, an entity came to me, interestingly enough, and said, "Come with me." The next thing I knew, my consciousness was watching the birth of my unborn child. Who was the entity that said, "Come with me"? And I was in a coma. And I can document this, which is cool because Mom was there. The first words out of my mouth when I came to some hours later was, "Go make a phone call. The baby was born." That woman had the most confused look I ever saw on her face. So when we slow our brains down, we become more conscious to the world around us. Now, this is interesting because when you go back in certain scriptures, and there's one that's particularly great, it's in Malachi, the 4th chapter. Malachi is the last book of the Hebrew scriptures, which the Hebrew law ends, but the prophecies are being twisted by those who claim to be Jews from the synagogue of Satan, but are not. That's why we have a lot of things that mirror prophecy. But when you look at that scripture in Malachi, it says, "The day is coming that is burning like the furnace, and to the wicked and the presumptuous, they will become like chaff, and neither root nor bough will be left to them. But to those of you who have respect for my name," this is talking about the creator of the multiverse, our soul connection back to God, the Father, the great I am, Yahuwah, whatever you want to refer to it as, the positive energy that keeps us all alive and living, that is waking us up now. "To you who have respect for my name, the sun of righteousness with healing in its wings." And you have to wonder, is this a referral to Nibiru? Because sun is spelled S-U-N, and of righteousness with healing in its wings will make you like young, strong, fattened calves who go forth pouring the ground. So we'll become healthy. Now, how does one event destroy those who live in that beta fight and flight, those presumptuous, those who believe they have the right to rule? But to those who put ourselves into that harmony, that take us out of the flight and fight and caring and love for each other, the alpha state, we survive. How does that happen? One event, 2 different outcomes. The divergence of the timelines. You see, there's no argument, Alfred. Those timelines have come together, and they're going in different locations. It's not like they're going to run, continuous. But we're talking about movement of galactic events, not just galactic, but the events that are happening on an interdimensional level that we're living through in real life here on Earth. To put this in perspective, when you look at the time frame, one galactic day, or what we could call a galactic day, is 1,000 Earth years, which means that this whole situation from the original seeding in the, quote, Garden of Eden with perfect human DNA to where we are now is about 6 cosmic days. Not too long. Another cosmic day. We'll be on our way to the next level. So here's where we look at what's going on. We're aware, we have evidence that the rulers of this maniacal system of evil that have sacrificed our children, that have invoked these demonic gods that have ruled mankind since the Anunnaki gave religion to the Sumerians and the Fertile Crescent was had come about, to where we are now, where we are on to their games. We understand their tricks. We are not going to play into their false flag or feed their negative responses. Now, how do we warn the world to wake up and don't feed into it, that we have a choice? We are people of free will. See, that's the thing. If you're part of a, if you're a patsy, you don't know that there's a conspiracy against you. And you see, by wiping out our real history, oh, well, that's false. That doesn't make any difference. What, it's been changed throughout history. You don't understand the real, we don't know what to believe anymore. No, if you do your research, you can find out what's true. Feel in your heart. Do you care for mankind? Do you care for your family? You see, it's that loving, caring. You go back to the greatest commandment. You must love Yahweh your God with your whole heart, soul, and mind. And you must love each other as you do yourself, because we're all family. So you have that, what I like to refer to as the woman's seed coming together, because all of this stuff vibrates with us. We want to get on the right frequency. We want to live our lives in love and get through this dimensional change. Now, we have a choice. We can either try to rely on ourselves, or we can rely on the energy of the multiverse and the energy that we can all bring together to work toward the common good of where we need to go. This paradigm that we are living in is going to end. The maniacal rulers who are worshiping these off-planet extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, whatever you want to call them, they are going to be captured and removed. That's
Right.
pretty much what it says. They are going to be captured and removed. And so now you have the King of Kings. Everybody thinks, oh, Jesus is coming back as the Prince of Peace. No, he's coming back as the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and he's bringing the armies of the multiverse, or heavens, with him.
Now, could we just right there hold it
Sure.
for just a moment?
Okay.
Oh, okay. So we have now just gotten started with the first of the Tetra eclipses, which has just occurred in April. And the second of the 4 Tetra eclipses is coming up in October, correct?
Correct. October 8th, I believe it is.
Yeah. And then the third Tetra eclipse is April 4th, 2015, followed by the last Tetra eclipse, the blood moon, on September 28th, 2015. We have about we have about half an hour left in the program. And so I think the dynamic that we're following is to follow through on these Tetra eclipses, knowing what has occurred for the last 3,000 years of history that we know of. But now, all of a sudden, post December 21st, 2012, this is the first mega Tetra eclipse that has come along in this new timeline. So we're trying to see what's going to happen. And
well, a paradigm change.
Yeah, okay. So I turn it over to you, and I'm going to resume my hat as the Greek chorus here. Okay, go ahead.
When we look at what has unfolded, starting with Comet Ison, and now we've got these two main memes of the Ebola, which we pretty much figure out is planned to take back the continent of Africa and recolonize it. And so just figure out who had something to gain, who lost something in this whole thing. And then you can track back where it comes from. Brings you back to the Europeans. And when you look at what's being played out on the world stage, there is change that's happening. And we can see that in the establishment of the BRICS banks. And interestingly enough, a major thing happened 2 days after the BRICS banks end. We get another Malaysian Airlines flight that goes down on the same day that they attacked Gaza. And Putin's blamed for it. He was a world star for helping establish these banks. So there's resistance to the change, but change is coming. However, change could be very drastic in the next coming months because of what they are trying to accomplish with these tetrad moons. and it's geared toward that 2045 transhuman agendas where they want to take it and
I
the
see.
depopulation level. So that's their target. That's not our target. And so that's where the divergence is, and that's why that has to end. So they're going to do everything to play that out. Where the timeline changes and where the impact becomes lessened. It's like, how do you fight City Hall? How do we fight this system which is put in place, this Anunnaki system of rule which is put in place? How do we decommission it? It might take an off-planet event to decommission it, to take it out of commission. Now, I can't imagine that the Queen is going to say, "Oh well, we're just going to forget about the whole royalty, the whole hierarchy of royals on the continent, and just turn the land over to the people, and everything should just be done by the people." And the Pope ain't going to say, "Well, let's just dissolve the church and forget about religion altogether." These are dyed-in-the-wool institutions that have been around for 4,500 years, since the time of the Sumerians. So this has to be removed, and it's being aware of, as these tetrad moons play out, what are they planning on doing? Well, when you run the parallels to what the intent is in the learned protocols of Zion, they want to end religion once and for all, or at least establish their own brand of religion. The Pope is trying to stay on top of that by establishing one world religion. Let's get everybody together, stay ahead of the curve.
Chrislam.
Yeah.
Christianity, Islam.
Christmas Jew. It takes, this was a Simpsons cartoon uniting all the religions. Christmas Jew, the Christian, Muhammad, and Judaism. Wait a minute. You watch these cartoons, and it's funny what they tell you, that what they're playing out is what's happening in the real world.
Yeah.
And there is substance to this, because the Vatican actually owns 60% of the city of Jerusalem, including everything around the Temple Mount. It seems like the Romans have encircled the Holy Temple once again. So, look at the parallels that are going on here, and we're tied up in the physical. I wonder, if you remove the electron from the atom, nothing would be physical. This really would be a holograph. It's that electron that allows us to touch things and come in contact things, which keeps it in the physical. But remove that electron, guess what? All the laws are off. When it comes right down to it. And an interesting thing about electrons, they can be in two places at the same time. So we are well aware of what is happening here. We've been kidnapped as a species. We've been interbred with by reptilians who are basically ruling the planet under Anunnaki law. And now is the time to remove that Anunnaki law, but they are not going to go peacefully. So you kind of have the raiders of the multiverse that are going to come and clean out Anunnaki law. How that actually happens, I can only call the Nibiru event. All of the prophecies, there are 6 prophecies that deal with this, the moon being turned to blood and the sun not giving its light. And all 6 are tied into the paradigm change of when the King of Kings and Lord of Lords show up. So here you've got what we can call the good ETs, the good interdimensionals. It's actually our interdimensional family. And this is very important to understand our connection, because it's a connection at the consciousness level and the soul, or what we call the soul level, our consciousness and the life force that keeps this alive. Without the consciousness and life force, this becomes a rack of meat and nothing more. But through this, we do a fantastic thing. You see, we can do something that no other alien life form can do, and that is biologically reproduce more children of God. You see, if we were perfect with a perfect genome and had that perfect connection back at the soul level to the source of all life, then we would indeed be creating more offspring, be fruitful, become many, fill the earth. See, the next step is not just the earth, to fill the stars. Genesis is only the beginning. This is only the beginning for Oh, it's the end of the human race. Unfortunately, it's the end of the human race. The race is over. You go back and you look at Genesis when, at the creation account, when you first had the first human seeded, perfect genetic pair on the planet. It says that they were naked and they were good with it. When we typically get naked with someone and we're good with it, it usually involves a form of lovemaking. And so we go into the alpha state. We leave that beta fight and flight behind, and we go into that alpha state of peace and love. And when you look at after they ate this proverbial fruit, and you have to question, was there a virus in the fruit which erased part of the DNA? We don't know, but boy, it would make logical sense because we have viruses which attack our DNA today. So once you erase the DNA, guess what? The God now knew, oh, gee, I already was a God. I didn't have to eat this to become like God. It's like, when does a fish understand it's wet? When it jumps out of water and realizes it ain't wet anymore. So our DNA was destroyed at that point. Now, when that happened, it says that they were embarrassed that they were naked. They covered themselves. Then they heard the voice of God and they took flight. They hid themselves. They were afraid. The beta operating system was installed into the brain. You look at the account and you see what happens. We need to take that beta operating system out. If we could remove the beta operating system from everyone on the planet Earth, guess what? Fighting would instantly end. Yeah, we'd have disagreements, but fighting would instantly end. Nobody would fight. Nobody would run.
Right.
Very
Now,
simple.
according to one model, that beta operating system is in fact transmitted from the Saturn-Moon matrix.
Alfred, I wouldn't argue with it. I wouldn't argue with it. I can argue with the results of giving a life form which has free will, has the power of free will, the beta operating system. That's insanity. There's a video on YouTube where these fighters in Africa somewhere give a chimpanzee a AK-47 with the safety off and a full clip. The chimpanzee is holding the gun, jumping up and down, and having a grand old time, and all of a sudden the finger goes on the trigger and he clears the camp. The guys that were laughing all thought it was great were now being shot at by a chimpanzee. You don't give a chimpanzee a loaded gun. You shouldn't give people, humans who have the power of free will, the opportunity to fight or flight, because they'll take advantage of it just for personal gain. Hey, he's got more than me. The Joneses just bought a new car, honey. Don't you think we need a new car too? You know, maybe we all need to get back to vibrating with the earth. And here's the thing. When we are in alpha, we are more in tune with the vibration of the very earth itself. Vibration of the earth is actually picked up. It's burning in high alpha now. But when we are in alpha, which vibrates between about 10 to 16 cycles per second, somewhere in there, the earth used to vibrate at about 8 cycles per second. So low alpha. So when we are in alpha, we are in harmony with what's going on in the earth. You know, when you're in alpha with the earth, you're usually sitting on the beach watching the waves come in with a cold drink in your hand. Isn't the earth beautiful? Yeah. When you're in alpha with the earth, you're sitting in the woods next to a stream, listening to the water run and feeling the cool breeze against your skin. And you say, isn't it beautiful? Yeah. Would you like a planet like this for your very own? There's one waiting. And that's the reality of it. You see, once we get past this dynamic, then think about how we reproduce. If we had perfect human DNA and didn't die, every healthy human woman is born with with approximately 400,000 eggs in her ovaries, and in a perfect condition, she could reproduce essentially 400,000 offspring. Now, women out there are saying no, and they got their legs crossed over themselves and are fretting that idea. But in a perfect environment, if you wanted to populate a planet, what kind of life form would you put on it? Be fruitful, become many, my children. Go make some grandchildren. Oh, they're gonna have children.
Now,
Think about it.
yeah. Now, now let me ask you this question, because I I know that we're coming up to the external shock issue. Now, what if we taking this new formula that the positive future equals the positive timeline plus unity consciousness, in other words, a dimensional shift. Could one not also interpret the future as as a dimensional shift? And
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
you know that a dimensional shift happens. It doesn't necessarily have to be a negative shock of the nature of a Nibiru event or the nature of a war, i.e., from the point of view of those who are inside the consciousness of the old timeline, where they're trying to get World War III started, or they're trying to get Nibiru started, or by using HARP, or they're trying to get Ebola started by using Ebola Gate and bioweapons. They could be suffering a shock because their whole world is falling apart because they can't get those things started. So for them, it's like, my God, we use these Tetra lunar eclipses and all of the black magic for 3,000 years, and we always won. But now we can't turn the corner. Can't you really interpret it as being that right now it's these guys getting clobbered by this new by the voice of God, by these new higher frequencies coming in through the interdimensional portal at the core of our universe, at the core of the black hole, of all of the singularities in our universe, the core of our universe, the core at our galaxy, the core at our solar system, which is the sun. And it's just blasting with unity consciousness, so that all these people that have been relying, on this past timeline and dimension, which is no more, on their formula of using the power of the mind control in the sun with all their formulas, and the Moloch worship and the Star of Moloch and all that stuff, but it just doesn't work anymore. So for them, it's the end of the world. It's like they're
Well,
they're they're going through their Armageddon. How
that
how
that's
about
exact.
that?
That's exactly what it is, Alfred. This is an off-planet fight that we've unfortunately gotten involved in because we were kidnapped. They're holding us for ransom for the rest of on the rest of the universe. We're the down payment. Uh, that was the whole reason that man came 2,000 years ago and said, "Hey, I'm coming back. And okay, got my body and my blood now, but I'm coming back with the multiverse." Well, now it's time. How it's going to happen, we don't know exactly. Now, this could be something clearly of a frequency thing. Everything runs by frequency. And the Earth has started into something we can talk about, and it's hard to exactly prove. Where does the hard data come about going through the
Yeah.
ozone belt?
Now let me just jump in here, and let me call you back, because all of a sudden things became really jumbled, and
Okay.
we only got a part. So could you? I'm going to call you right back so that you could just repeat again what you just said, which was very good. I'll call you right back. Okay, so what we were talking about is the fact that, couldn't this really be a a frequency dimensional shift? And so from the perspective of those that for the last 3,000 years, they've been manipulating the system and doing their lunar, uh, dealing with the moon Saturn matrix, dealing with their Moloch stuff, manipulating it so they would do all of their genocidal stuff during the lunar eclipses. And now, as of December 21st, 2012, this we come onto a new timeline where that doesn't have traction anymore. So that to them, where they start Ebola Gate, where they start ISIS, where they start all these programs, it just comes back on them. So to them, it feels like Armageddon. But to us, we're just having a great time.
Well, yes, and you see, that's when you move from the fight and flight of the beta fear factor into a frequency change of love, because then we change internally. How we internalize what's going on changes. It's like it's like the difference of being in a car accident yourself and seeing one on the side of the road. Well, if you know enough to avoid the accident, then you'll only see the disaster that's laying behind. Now, if we're in tune, now think about the last 100 years. How many people have really woken up? How many people started questioning the government? Think about Y2K. If all the computers would have gone down at Y2K and they would have reestablished whatever computer system they wanted, they could have rolled out a one world government at that time, had control of everything. They tried to do that with the 2000, with the 9/11 event, where they rolled out the Patriot Act, and nobody knew what was on the Patriot Act. Sounded good. They rolled it out. They already had it ready. Everybody, the Americans were essentially all needing depends there, and lost the testicular fortitude to stand up and say, we're all patriots. What do we need an act for? Get out of here. So that all kind of didn't work either, although they got their laws through, but mostly through the presidential edicts or proclamations, or when he officially signed something, say, I'm going to be whatever I want to be and make whatever law I want to make a law. And this started with Roosevelt, really, when he took away our standard of living and when he made gold as an illegal tender. You can't pay bills with gold anymore. You can't own gold anymore. You got to give it all to the Rothschilds. Well, there's the Federal Reserve. Now we see the problem with the Federal Reserve. People are saying, hey, where'd this money go? You guys are screwing us around. Bankers start dying. People see what's going on. We couldn't see what was going on 40, 50, 60 years ago. And so now we're getting closer to the end. And it's interesting. It says the closer to the end you get, the brighter the light gets. Wow. And so if we've started this essentially 2,000-year trip through the photon belt, those of us who make that shift and live in light and truth and seek the truth will actually become part of what the scriptures, or what Jesus called in Matthew the 24th chapter, the 22nd verse. It says that things would get so bad that only the chosen ones would live. Well, if we can enlighten 7 billion people, that means 7 billion people are chosen ones. You see, and so now you get to that problem.
Yeah. Now, but given this formula, which is that the positive future equals the positive timeline plus unity consciousness, and there's a synergy there. There really is, and I'm saying, it seems to me that we can sail through these remaining three blood moons, these remaining three Tetra lunar eclipses, with no Nibiru event, with no World War III. It's just all this is humanity's consciousness awakening.
Well,
That's all it is.
There doesn't have to be a World War III. That points out as a definite meme. You see, it's interesting. I'm going to just refer to Arthur C. Clarke in the movie 2010.
Yeah.
all of a sudden there's a second sun in our solar system, and we're told we're given a message that we are not alone.
Yeah,
And right just before this happens, the United States and Russia are ready to go to nuclear war.
yeah,
So, it's interesting how that unfolded. Now, that Arthur C. Clarke based that on what his perception of the future was back in the 60s. So look how it's been delayed in some ways, and that's given a whole another generation, or given us time to wake up.
yeah,
To think about the things that you knew when you got out of college. Think, oh, okay, well, I've got a degree. It's a good one. What things do I know? And now you go and you start learning what's really in the world after you get your degree. And so it's based on our own research and never saying, okay, I got my degree, I'm done. No, it's on constant learning, constant attention. It's on constant human development and growth. And then we start to come to understand, wow, we're not our bodies. We are something much greater.
much greater. But, and although we can say, if we go back over the historical record, that in all of the Tetra eclipses, going back 3,000 years, all the way ones coming up to 1917, coming up to 1948, coming up to, all of, coming up to the ones 1967, coming up to 1973. Now that we're up into 2014, 2015, which comes after December 21st, 2012, that we're on this new positive timeline. We're in a new dimension in which our universe is in a new reality frequency of unity consciousness. That now, even though we're in a tetralunar eclipse, it doesn't mean that it's going to be like before. It means that those parties, this tribe, the leaders of this tribe that are trying to get all this going by reaching out to their buddies up in the moon, but they can't get it going. It's like, and so we're just going to keep on going through the positive timeline,
Yeah,
and they're going to deconstruct. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. Today's Tuesday, September 9th. We don't know what's going to happen 9 days from now on September 18th, when Scotland votes whether to go independent or not. I was looking at the odds, and it's really, today the odds were like in favor of yes, right? But who knows what's going to happen? But that deconstructs the monarchy, which is a large part on which world Zionism has been based for the last 300-400 years.
Yes.
So
yeah, we're in this time of flux, basically.
Yeah.
It's like things are starting to coalesce. Now, here's an interesting thing. When you look at I'll call it a parable of the Exodus, the ninth plague, you go through the Exodus, they had swarms of locusts, the rivers turned to blood, massive fish dies, and all scientists turn around and they say, okay, we can explain all these things biological. Sri Lanka and India have been experiencing red rain, and it's biological in the rain that they don't know where it comes from. They're guessing it comes from an out of this planet source. So we're seeing these kind of like biblical events. So you have to kind of like pay attention to what's going on in Exodus. Now, the ninth plague is that the lights go out. Now, the lights went out for Upper Egypt. Lower Egypt, where the Great Pyramid is, it says that their homes had illumination, yet Upper Egypt, where the Pharaoh reigned, they were in total darkness. They couldn't go anywhere. I guess not even their candles worked for some reason, whatever. But the ninth plague is interesting. This is where the first Passover starts, which is what is being manipulated now. The ninth plague is the death of the firstborn of all of Egypt. Now, what killed them? There's no record. It said the record is the destroying angel or the destroyer. Well, was this an ET that came down? How did this happen? Now, it could have all been geared into a frequency shift. Shift the frequency of that person, boom, you end that person's life. Could we experience much the same thing? Yes. If the world is put into total terror and horror, and they all wind up having heart attacks over what they're seeing, and we're looking at it saying, "Nah, don't worry about it. This will be over soon." Like any good storm, watch, enjoy. You see, so it's what will change, and it has to do with our own very vibration and our own very awakening to that paradigm of love. Getting rid of the beta operating system and being aware of the alpha system. And that's where both prayer and meditation come in. Prayer
Right.
connects us back to the source of the universe, the multiverse. The meditation allows us to create our own future, as well as get messages. Oh, guess what? Go walk across to the other side of the street because something is ready to fall on this side. You know?
And everything, everything that the false matrix, the Saturn-Moon matrix, moon calendar, moon religion people, Zionist people have been trying to throw at us is all false flags. It's all
Who's
false flags. It's all based on lies. You know, from 9/11 to, on down to, the whole lie that a bunch of Khazars, have a right to Palestine. I mean, it's just a total historical lie. you know, there's books written about how King David didn't exist and Israel didn't exist. The kingdom of Israel doesn't exist historically. I mean, it's all a pack of lies. So
Yeah.
it's just lies. It's all lies. It's all lies. So
But
so
but 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 who made up the
that,
lies?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what you have to look at.
yeah,
Who
yeah.
made up the lies?
It's all about money, land grabs, power manipulation. So, so we're now in a frequency in which they, you know, they can't get traction with that anymore. So why? Because on December 21st, 2012, or October 28th, 2011, we came into a timeline, into a frequency domain, uh, in which unity consciousness, we are one. That frequency does not allow duality consciousness, which is I win, you lose, which is the consciousness of Moloch. Whoever bows to the star of Moloch, and who bows to the star of Moloch, we all know, to do it. So, Nibiru's a fraud. War is a fraud. World War III is a fraud. They're all frauds. So it seems to me that we're just going to have clear sailing on through, because everything around MH370 of Malaysia Airlines was a false flag. MH17 was a false flag. They tried to blame it on a tribunal of which I was a judge. And when they try to start World War III around me, man, I know that thing's bogus. I know that's bogus.
And you know what I love, Alfred? Out of all the people that I've ever met, is that you are the only one who came to the conclusion of how to stop what the worst of what might be coming by laying out your platform. When you brought up the point about running for Secretary General of the United Nations, that was essentially a suit for peace.
Yeah.
Now, your platform, interestingly enough, was released long before the Pope released his 43-page or 41-page treatise on changing the world economic system.
Right.
But they contain some of the same qualities. It's obvious. You got to end war. You got to end poverty.
Yeah.
You have to do these things, because if we don't do them voluntarily, they're going to be done for us. Now, here's an interesting thought. when you read the actual account of whatever happened, and there's a lot of ways to think about this. Let's go back to that lenticular cloud that I talked about in Exodus. When you read the account in Revelation, in the 6th chapter, the 12th through the 17th verses, it says that here's where the reality, if you want to call it that, comes in. It says that the a great earthquake appears, and that the sun becomes as black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon is turned to blood red. So something is getting in between to create that haze within Earth's atmosphere that will, where you see the moon so many really red times. Doesn't mean it's a physical lunar eclipse, although it might be. I haven't checked the lunar eclipses for 2016, but anyway, it's worded that it goes on. It says that the heavens would be rolled up like the scrolls, and that we would see the stars falling from heaven, or at least what would look like shooting stars coming through our atmosphere. And it says that the island groups and the very mountains would be removed. Now, sometimes mountains are, well, a lot of times mountains in Scripture are kingdoms. As a matter of fact, if you talk about the mountain of Yahweh, or you are talking about His kingdom. So, but it says the mountains are removed, symbolically or realistically, I don't know. But it says that all those in charge of this satanic system, the kings, the mighty men, the military commanders, and essentially all of their support staff, call out to the mountains and seek shelter. And then it says, but who can hide from the judgment of the one seated on the throne and from the Lamb? Now, let's picture this. They think that there's an event coming that is going to wipe out life on Earth, and they want to ensure that nothing exists on the planet. So they start a Fukushima, they turn around and they get their Ebola meme, they get their ISIS meme, they get everything going, and they're going underground, right? Where do you want to be if there's a fantastic earthquake that's never happened before on the planet? If all of those who are creating the system of evil that exists on this planet seek shelter underground, who's up? Who's above ground? Who's out of those deep underground military bunkers? Who's not in those deep cities that they've built?
All of us. Yeah.
Problem solved. Case closed.
Yeah.
Now, do we
That,
need a Nibiru event to destroy the whole planet and upset the whole apple cart? I don't know, but here's an interesting thing. One of the
no. But you see, that could be symbolic or metaphoric, i.e., it's about dark consciousness versus in the light. They can't. Its service to self cannot ascend beyond lower fourth. See, because if you talk to Mary Rodwell, who works with these crystal kids that go up in the ships at night and then they come down, she's talking about around 2017 there is going to be a huge event of shift of consciousness.
oh, I don't
And
doubt. Yes,
and the service to self will not be able to go with that shift because they can't surrender and they can't exist in the new frequencies.
and they are
And I
going to stop
and,
existing.
and I think that and so they're the ones that are, and for them that's a Nibiru like event. That's like the end of the world, and they're off on some other timeline. But it's not necessary. We don't have to give it physicality. It's just a dimensional shift, and then they experience it in terms of their own tapes, in terms of their own
They may,
whatevers.
according to the references, the biblical references, they just stop experiencing.
Yeah. So
So
it's just, and maybe the guy who remote viewed that's how he remote viewed the shift of consciousness, because that's how he saw it. Because what we're talking about is dimensional shifts. We aren't talking about celestial events.
well,
Because look, there is no brown. The closest brown dwarf is like the closest star, let alone brown dwarf, is 5 6.2 light years away from the solar system.
Alfred, I want to put this in a slightly different context for you. What if it isn't a planet? What if it is a ship?
Well, okay, it could be a
You know,
ship.
because we still have the negative ETs to deal with, to be removed, and that is the primary mission, is to remove the negative ETs and their worshippers here
Yeah,
on the planet.
yeah,
So
yeah. Then fine. Maybe what happens? You know, they're like there's a whole band of people that have been in communication that says, look, what happens is that the moon gets removed. Yeah, because the moon has been like the main broadcaster of the matrix with the negative ETs, and the people in the moon have been in collaboration and have been the handlers of the Zionists for the last 3,000 years. So maybe the moon gets removed, and when you're talking about the ship, you're talking about the moon that gets removed, because the moon is an artificial satellite. It's not a celestial body per se. It's camouflaged to look like a celestial body, you know,
yeah,
according to that paradigm.
I have no argument with
Yeah.
that, and we know that, there's, I can't say we know, there's strong circumstantial evidence that there's buildings and somebody's doing
Yeah.
something on the moon. We've got
If,
astronauts telling us that they
if
said
you
don't come
hit
back.
if you hit the moon, it rings like a bell.
Yeah, so it's like, what's up?
Yeah.
It's the one thing that I've learned, in my whole experience here, Alfred, is that we can never underestimate or take anything for granted.
Yeah. So maybe what their prophet who remote viewed that, he was seeing some type of moon event when the moon, the Saturn moon matrix is deconstructed and somehow taken down, which is the event that would psychically liberate us here on the planet. I mean, I'm just kind of, you
Well,
know,
there's a tie-in, some very strong tie-ins back to the reason for that the whole, law of the Passover was given, was to point to the Messiah, the one who, the seed of the woman who would redeem. And you can appreciate this. It was essentially the fine that was paid for the, soul that Adam sold to Satan, so to speak. So the fine was paid. So now that the fine was paid, you kind of get your vehicle back if you want. If
yeah,
you paid that situation. Well, the redemption was, to get us on the positive timeline. So that price was paid 2,000 years ago. So now here we are 2,000 years later, and we're starting to realize, okay, we've got to get into this, quote, Christ consciousness, or we've got to give up the paradigm of fear and hate and wanting to hurt people, and move it into a consciousness of love. Now we move out of that in enlightenment, which takes place now in this time frame. We still need to remove those negative ET. Well, we don't, but those negative ETs still need to be removed. That the Anunnaki need to be hauled off.
yeah.
So that is the return of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who ensures us 1,000 years of peace, to get one day, one cosmic day of peace,
Yeah.
before we take our next step
Step.
and go beyond anything that's recorded in the scriptures.
Okay, good. Now, we have, as they say, come to the end of this segment. So I think what would be good is that we are now uh, at September 9th. The next blood moon is October 8th. So we need to reconvene our panel when? Just after the third Tetra blood moon, in other words, in April of 2015.
Alfred, we ought to turn around and meet by events,
By
because
events, right?
everyone looks at dates, but we're told, hey, when it's coming. You don't need a date. All you have to do is realize the season that you're in,
Okay,
and we
good.
can see where we are. So let's
Okay,
do this.
let's just do it by events.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is good. So would you like to leave our viewers with some thoughts on what we learned now and on how they can reflect on the coming timeline.
Oh, absolutely. Um, it comes down to something very, very basic, and the more basic you can make something, the better it is. Uh, we have, without a question, 4,500 years of historical support of Anunnaki rule of planet Earth. It's got to come to an end. When you look at all of the historical records, whether they be Mayan, Anunnaki, or the biblical record, or virtually all the other civilizations, say this is the time for change. Now, when you look at the biblical record, it says that we have to change from the, essentially from the frequency, and then don't take the biblical record as a religious record. It's 6,000 years of alien interference, alien interference in human affairs. We have to look at it from that exopolitical level, where the price has been paid, and the time has come due to take possession of what is rightfully belongs to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, which is essentially like our big brother. So that shift will get us the getting out of the beta operating system of the mind, moving into the consciousness of love and unity, because we're coming together. It's no longer a race. It's got to be a family. It's all a family affair. And so we're coming together again as that family unity consciousness. Hey, who do you care more for than your relatives? Your own family, your own flesh and blood. And we are each other's flesh and blood. And the more people that understand that on this planet, the easier the transition becomes. It's just that simple. Exactly how it all comes apart, stay tuned. Watch the events. Things are going to get better before they get worse. We still have to see the collapse of the dollar or the replacement of the Federal Reserve System. So that's what I would expect to be the next event. That, and we have to look at the Pope wanting to have a one world religion. Very important things.
Okay, good. Now, my contribution as the Greek chorus, this is a Greek chorus that doesn't talk about the tragedy. This is the Greek chorus that talks about the positive timeline that we're in. And that is that to remember that as of December 21st, 2012, or October 28, 2011, things shifted. We're now in a positive timeline. The universe portal is broadcasting waves of unity consciousness. The formula now is positive future equals positive timeline plus unity consciousness. We know that all these Tetra eclipses may have worked in the past for them to work their genocide on Palestine and the Palestinians, but this Tetra eclipse of 2014 to 15 is different, and it's not working because it's coming in and all of their plans are bouncing. All the Malaysian Airlines MH17, they all bounced. They tried to do Ukraine, it all bounced out, it all boomeranged. They're all boomeranging. And so sit back and watch the boomerangs and just know that it's science. It's not rocket science, folks. It's time science. Peter, we want to thank you for all the time and effort for your application of your genius to hermeneutics, and we look forward to the next convening of our panel. Thank you very much.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Love and blessings to you and yours and all those who watch this, because it's that love that'll bring us together in unity as one big happy family. The change is underway. Become part of it. You might as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, Alfred.
Thank you.